And it's time now for Clarion Connection here with Ron Wilshire. Ron, good morning.
Morning, Steve. How was Valentine's Day?
It was as riveting as it always is.
It sounds like you're still playing music related to it.
Yeah,
About
well,
the heart.
it's country, and you kind of have to have something involving heartbreak or love or dogs or trains or something to that nature.
Well, we're going to talk a little bit about heartbreak today. The Governor Corbett has proposed a budget that promotes a lot of serious cuts, and because of declining revenue, and the proposal for the budget includes a 20% cut in funding for the state system of higher education, which of course includes universities like Clarion University. So we're going to talk a little about the impact of that type of cut and the operations at Clarion University. Today we have Jamie Phillips. He's president of the Clarion branch of APSCUF. He's also a professor of philosophy at Clarion. Welcome, Jamie.
Thank you very much for having me, Ron. I appreciate it.
I noticed in today's Oil City Derrick there was a letter to the editor concerning an article that they previously published called Clarion Gears Up for Fight Against Cuts. This letter is from the Guido Piccini, the chair of the System Board of Governors, and John C. Kavanaugh, the chancellor of the system. And I'll just read a little bit about it. We want to begin by assuring students at Clarion University and throughout the Pennsylvania state system of higher education that our highest priority is to do everything possible to keep our universities the most affordable in the Commonwealth. The loss of $90 million in state and federal funding is the current year's budget will be equivalent to $800 per student, has required our universities to operate in recession mode. While dealing with significant financial pressures, we have kept our commitment to our students and their families not to recover the entire amount of reduced funding from tuition, which was increased by $436. This isn't the first time Clarion's faced cuts from the Commonwealth, is it?
It is not. Actually, we've been working with reduced funding, I'd say, for the last decade, but last year it became particularly serious when the governor came back with a 54% cut to the PASHE, amongst cuts to other different state entities. And we fought back against that, and we were fairly successful in our efforts. We had lots of rallies on campus here, and we had rallies across the state system, and we had rallies in Harrisburg. And we were able, with the work of the legislature and people who are dedicated to higher education, to get that cut down to 18%. And so we're working off that 18% cut this year itself. The governor came back again with another request for 5% back from the state system, which we have not yet given. The Board of Governors has not said yes to that yet. And then we've got another 20% to look at. And so when you add it up together over the last 2 years from Governor Corbett, we have a 34% proposed cut to higher education if this is allowed to go through. And I hope that it isn't. We're working diligently. We've been working before the budget even came out. We had informational desks set up in anticipation of a budget cut to send postcards from students to the governor requesting that he not cut higher education. He did it anyway. And so now we're going to work with the legislature to get that money back. I don't want a single dollar increase in student tuition in the fall. Nobody wants that. And I think the legislature recognizes the value of the state system, and they're going to work to reduce the cut. And maybe this is pure, blatant, pointless optimism, get it down to zero. But if we can't get it down to zero, we want to get it down to something that limits severely the amount of tuition increase that students would see.
But Clarion has made efforts over the years to trim its budget and its operations. Do you want to go into some of the cuts or the changes that have taken place?
Yeah, and at the state system level, I think they've tried to cut and have successfully cut about $220 million over the last decade from where we were back in 2000. They've done that through centralizing operations, centralizing software usage. We've had a steady reduction in faculty here at Clarion University over the past decade. We simply have not replaced people, and that's how we've dealt with the cuts. Every year there'll be more retirements than there are replacements, and that's been a steady pattern throughout. We don't have a particularly large staff. We don't have a particularly large management pool. We've dealt with the decreasing funding for a very long period of time. It's just that when you get such a shock to the system like a 54% cut or a 20% cut, there's really not much you can do at that point. You're not going to have enough retirements, even speculatively, to get to that. And so I'm not sure what we can do except have massive layoffs.
In terms of the fewer faculty members, repercussions for the students, has that resulted in larger classes?
It is difficult to say. We actually had, and across the state system, because of all the budget difficulties, a lot of students just elected not to go to college. Right? So we had a 5% decrease in students going into the fall semester. We have large classes. We've had them for some time. That's been another way that we've dealt with. I can't say that our class sizes are significantly larger this year. I don't have that evidence to support that. I can say that we did not replace faculty, and so that many more classes have not been offered that would have otherwise been offered.
In terms of the economy and the reduction in enrollment at Clarion, was it that way over the system, or I had heard that particularly Clarion and I know Mansfield were hit pretty bad, and it
was pretty much across the state system. I think there were 3 schools that I'm aware of that had mild increases in students. Westchester, for example, which is right next to Philadelphia. But it was across the state system where we had decreases. Mansfield and Clarion were some of the harder hit. I think we were both in the 5% range, but other state system schools had decreases in tuition, in student population. We still have an inordinately large number of students, more than we've ever had. You know, we're upwards of 120,000 students in the state system. So we have a lot of students nonetheless, and there was increases as far as I can tell from fall to spring. Right? But I think what happens is that when you make it more expensive for people to go to college, fewer people can go to college. You know, for some people, they're on the margins, and you increase tuition $500, that could be enough. They can say, well, I just can't afford that. And that's the great travesty here, is that you have people who are smart, who are hardworking, who want to get a college education, they want to improve themselves, they want to get a better job, and when you cut things like this, they just can't afford it, and so they have to go do something else.
Do you think people still view a college education as a ticket to a better job?
I think everybody does, and I think that they should, and it is a better ticket to a better job. That's what it was for me. I grew up poor in Missouri, and if I hadn't been, I went to the military to get the GI Bill. I got the GI Bill, helped me pay my way through college. I spent 9 years in college. If it had not been, though, and I worked 3 jobs while I went through college, but if it had not been for the state of Missouri, I'm from Missouri, ponying up part of the bill, I couldn't have afforded that. It never would have happened. And I would not be here today. I would be back in Missouri doing Lord knows what, but I certainly wouldn't be as successful as I have been. And I want that for everybody else. And I think it is a gateway to a better job. I think anybody who's gone to college recognizes that. I think that it's become part of the credentials of society across the board, that if you want to get a job that's going to be a middle-class job, that's going to help you take care of your family, get enough money that you can buy a house, then you need to go to college. And so when you don't allow students to go to college, all you end up doing is increasing people who are members of the poorer classes, the working classes, and you deny the American dream to the majority of people.
I noticed in, I believe it was the letter I was reading from, or another statement, that 80% of the state system graduates stay in Pennsylvania after they graduate.
That's right. That's right. And we are economic engines because of that and because of what we do locally. Clarion University has got to be the largest employer in the county, and I think that that's true for a lot of the state universities. But our students stay here, and they work here, and they provide money here, so the investment in them is an investment in the future of Pennsylvania. And so if the governor's interested in economics, it would be foolhardy, to my mind, to do something that's going to cause students to have to leave the state, to cause young people to have to leave the state because they don't have the college education that's going to get them the jobs that they need to stay.
And obviously the purpose of the university is for the students, but there are practical consequences of smaller enrollments at places like Clarion on the community.
It is. I mean, you get spiraling enrollment patterns, and so, maybe that's intentional on the government's part. But if you have fewer faculty, you have fewer classes, right? And we only have a few places where you can have very large classes. There's only a few venues that we have, like Hart Chapel, and we got a couple auditorium places. And when that happens, then you don't have sections for students to have, and they can't enroll, and then they leave. And then the money that they would bring to the university and bring to the local community is gone. And once you start that spiral, and the spiral began last year for us, if that spiral continues for the next 6 years under this governor, it will be devastating to the local community. I mean, I don't think that we're at the point where I'm concerned personally that the university would close, although that people have mentioned that. You know, there are people in the legislature who have suggested that's a possibility that some universities could just be shut down. How that solves the problem, I don't know. It seems to exacerbate it. But if you have simply a steady decline, that's a steady decline in the local economy, and we're trying to ward that off.
And right, with the fewer employees, that's less money spent in the community. Like a professor, say, might go downtown and do some shopping, or that wouldn't be there. The restaurants, the involvement in the school system in the area wouldn't be there.
In Clarion, we all shop here. This is where we live. You know, I live in town. I live on Wood Street. I walk to work. You know, I can buy flowers on the way. There's even a funeral home on my street. You know, so all my work will be done in Clarion University. You know, in Clarion County. And so, yeah, all the money that we make goes into the local community. We don't, you know, it's not wasted money. It goes right back in and helps everybody else out.
Right. The figures. Let's see. More recently, the state revenue collections lagging behind projections. Governor Corbett asked Pashy, I believe you referenced this, to freeze an additional 5% or $20.6 million from this year's appropriation of $412.7 million. The Board of Governors has asked the governor for time to study the impact of this additional reduction would have on our students. So they're talking about money they gave us. They want it back.
Right. The governor, and he did that across the state system, the state, asking for money back. I think he was going to basically set it aside in case the projections didn't come in as they were. Some units, I think Judiciary, for example, has already denied. They're not going to give the money back. Some have already done so. You know, I think FIA, for example, already gave the money back, and then they got cut. Right? The Board of Governors had an opportunity to give the money back in, I think it was January, and they elected to wait, and I think they're waiting to see what the budget was going to be. And so I can't tell you what they're going to do. Obviously, that's another concern. If they go ahead and say, well, we're going to give the 5% back, and then we're going to try to get it down to a 10% cut, then that's a 15% cut, you know, and I'm doubtful that if that 5% goes off into the state that we'll ever see it again.
Right. For those listening, the state system, while it's state-owned, isn't a direct report to the governor, so the governor can only ask for this. Now, under the regular budget proposal, he's also targeted Penn State and Pitt, the state-related, so-called state-relateds, with a 30% cut for the coming year.
That's right. I think with the exception of Lincoln. And so the state-relateds are given 30% back. We've got 20% back. It's a bigger hit on us, though. The state appropriations for us is about 22% of our budget. I think the state appropriation for Penn State is something like 4% of their budget. And so it's different for us, you know, and they can increase their tuition, and they're still going to have the same kind of students. You know, Penn State's not going to lose students by raising their tuition 4%, but we can lose students. People would not go to college otherwise by raising tuition. Yeah.
Well, thanks, Jamie. We'll take a break right now of Clarion Connection.
Can you believe it has been almost 5 years that Once Again Consignment Shop has been helping our community sell their good condition household goods, furniture, and clothing at a great price?
I was there yesterday, and wow, the store looks great. It's so homey and clean, and the customer service there is so friendly. I saw they needed furniture. Let's see what we can take over so we can get some money for a summer vacation.
I have a box of decorations I don't want anymore, too. I'll call for an appointment. What's the number?
226-7565.
In the whole month of February, all blue tags are 50% off.
Live from Progressive.
Flo here with breaking news. Let's go to Jim in the chopper.
Hey, Flo, looks like Progressive is offering the Snapshot discount. It's their biggest discount ever. Should be huge.
That's big, Jim. But what's with the chopper?
What do you mean? It's a chopper. Choppers are sweet.
They kinda are.
The Snapshot discount. It's new, it's a big deal, and it's finally here. Learn more at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and its affiliates, Mayfield Village, Ohio. Prices vary based on how you buy. Snapshot is not available in all states.
My name is Joe Thompson. I'm 29 years old and I have a career that I love as a systems analyst. Career. It still sounds cool to say that word. I never could have gotten on this path without a college degree. And if the college me were here, he'd tell you.
I never would have gotten to college without Big Brothers Big Sisters. I could have ended up anywhere, on the streets even. But college? Joe Thompson? Not likely. My big brother helped me out. He taught me I could do anything, at a time when a lot of people were saying just the opposite.
And to a 7-year-old, that means a lot. My big brother's name is Phil, and Phil is the reason that this 7-year-old grows up to be a systems analyst.
Whether you donate money or time, you're helping Big Brothers Big Sisters help a child, and that can last a lifetime. Start something today at bigbrothersbigsisters.org. Brought to you by Big Brothers Big Sisters and the Ad Council.
Welcome back to Clarion Connection. We're talking about the proposed cuts to higher education with Jamie Phillips, president of the Clarion unit of APSCUF. There's been a lot of discussion about increasing tuition, and Clarion has made a good case for cuts that it has made to keep the costs down. But a lot of people don't realize that the bill that a student or family gets for going to college includes a lot more things than tuition.
It's extremely expensive to go to college. But I mean, some students live at home, to be sure, but most are going to be living in our dormitories. They're going to be living at our student apartments out at Reinhardt Villages. They have to pay for those. They have to pay for their food. They got to pay for fees for parking. They got to pay for fees for the gym. They got to pay fees to graduate. They got to pay fees for tech. They've got all kinds of fees that they have to pay. And the university and all the universities across the board have been upping fees to account for the fact that there's less in state appropriations. So when the state doesn't pony up the bill, doesn't help out with those students, the students end up paying more and more for their education, and that makes it less and less plausible for them to go to college.
As a state institution, Pennsylvania doesn't pay for any activity at the university other than educational purposes. They don't pay for the housing. They don't pay for the things like the rec center and everything. So while the costs of higher education have risen, the increases in tuition probably aren't as much as the total increases in the higher ed bill.
No, that's right. I mean, everything costs more than it used to, and the amount of money that a student pays, I still say that probably the bulk of it's going to be what it would normally be for anybody else. It's going to be where you live, the food that you eat. The tuition is only a small portion of that, which, when it comes right down to it, the state doesn't pay very much at all for the student's education, and we're only asking for a pittance, and they want to cut the pittance that they're providing. That's very disheartening about it. We spend something on the order of over $30,000 a year on a felon. We got about 50,000 felons in the state of Pennsylvania. We spend about $30,000 a year. It's going to be more this year. And the amount we spend on a student is going to be around maybe $2,000 after this. Right?
I remember the old slogan that I think it was Jesse Jackson had, that it costs more to send a student more to send an individual to jail than it does Yale. And
I think that's fairly accurate, unless it's a particularly good school they're going to. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
But the higher ed costs the rise in higher ed costs in part are because higher ed institutions have been encouraged to adopt more of a business model, and so they become competitive with each other, build better residences for the students hopefully to continue to attract more students, right. But those have to be paid for.
Right. Well, if you have a state providing the bulk of tuition money, then it makes it really easy for somebody to go regionally, right? When the state appropriations decline, then it makes it less plausible for somebody to go regionally. So then campuses have to make up the difference. They got to start searching for students, and they have to start attracting students to them. That's the business model, and so you have to make yourself attractive to students. Part of that's going to be through infrastructure improvement, and that's going to be typically funded outside. It's either going to be funded by the students themselves or through the rent that they pay, through bonds that have to be paid off. And it means that a lot of what we have to do is not as educationally based as it should be. Absolutely.
Now, in terms of expenses and costs, in Clarion County, probably a professor has one of the, highest salary positions in
Sure.
the area. But let's go into a little bit more what's required for that position, because there's certain requirements for education and experience.
I mean, typically, if you're a professor at a university, if you want to be a tenured professor, that is, stay around, you have to have the terminal degree, which in most cases is going to be a PhD or a Doctor of Education degree, Doctor of Business, and it takes a long period of time. When I went like I said, I was in the military for 4 years. I had an undergraduate degree at University of Missouri that took 4 years, and then I went and got my master's and my PhD, and that was another 5 years, and that was pretty quick. You know, there are some people that are going to be in college for upwards of 10, 12 years. It can be longer that you're working on your PhD than somebody is working on their MD. And so you take a lengthy period of your life hoping to get a job. It's a major risk, if you like. And that you don't have many job openings, and you don't have much else that you can do. And so when you take that risk and you come here, part of what with the salary is to reward the fact that you've taken such a risk with your life, that you're going to be a philosopher. You know, when I applied here at the university, I had 250 people I was competing with. You know, and I had to beat out those other 250 people. Right? And to do that, you have to be particularly good at what you do, and we have good salaries, and I'm not going to deny it. Right? And we work hard for our salaries just like anybody else does, but they're still good salaries, and it has to do with the amount of work that you put into it, the risk that you take, and the options that you have. Because when you bring somebody in with a PhD, you have to really tell them that you're going to be here for the rest of your life, because you're sure not going to get a job someplace else. You know, if you have some, and that's why I worry about faculty losing their jobs, as I do worry about students with tuition, is that you're going to have somebody who's 55 years old. Right? They've got a PhD in some rare discipline that the university wanted them to have because they wanted that particular educational knowledge, and now potentially they could be retrenched or laid off, and there's literally nothing else they can do, right, with their life. Right?
What you want to go over a day in the life of a professor, because they do more than just teach.
Well, sometimes we're on the radio.
Oh, yes. Okay.
But you know, for the most part,
there goes a half hour.
There's a half hour. That's right. The typical professor, I'll use myself as an example of a typical professor. I get into work about 8:30 every morning, and I leave about 5:30 every night. Right? And I teach 4 classes a semester. That involves enormous amounts of grading, enormous amounts of student meeting with students, and we have to do. We have to run the university. The university doesn't run itself, and so we have a very small management. We have limited staff, and so everything that has to be done in terms of the function of the university, accreditation, all through, is done by faculty. We have faculty committee work. I'm on more committees than I could begin to tell you, doing all kinds of different things at the university to make sure that it runs fluidly, that it improves, that it's constantly working to the benefit of students. And I don't have enough time in the day to do it. And that's okay. Like I said, I make a good salary, and I don't mind working. But that's a typical day for a faculty member. You have meetings with other faculty, you have meetings with administration, you have meetings with people outside. You have to conduct your research. If you want to maintain yourself, you have to do research. That is, you have to write and publish and present. You have to maintain scholarly interest. You've got to go to workshops and presentations. You have to work on your pedagogy. You have to do all the things that's going to make you a successful professor and make your students successful students. And if you do it right, and I think most of us do, it's more than you can do in the course of a single day. Yeah.
So once you receive your PhD, you have to continue your education to remain
Absolutely.
active.
I mean, you have to continue on doing all things. Now, typically what people do is they do research, which means that they write papers for publication, or they write for presentations. But they have to work on all this continuously, or they're not going to be retained. You know, it's not enough. You don't just suddenly get tenure and then that's it. You know, even when you get tenure, you're under constant review, right? And if you're not up to snuff in your research, or your teaching is failing, or you're not doing enough university work, then you can be let go, and that happens. And that is just part of the job. I mean, that's the nature of being a professor.
Well, in some disciplines, aren't students also involved in the research, so it's a double purpose?
Yeah, I think that's it. We try to do that at Clarion. I'm not sure about a lot of universities. I know at Clarion we make a special effort to make sure that students are engaged in undergraduate research, so that they know what the profession's like. We do a lot of student shadowing. We have an undergraduate research conference. We do honors projects. I'm working on an honors project this semester with a student doing undergraduate research. And we want the students to not only learn what it's like to, don't want just to go to school, but learn what it's like to be in the profession that they've chosen. So we have people like in anthropology. Right? They do field work out with the professors. And they do that during the summer on their own time. You know, this is what it is to be a professor, is that you're trying to get the students to the point where they can move on into professional life as well.
So what have the students told you about these, proposed budget cuts and possible impact on them?
Well, we had over 400 students send off postcards to Governor Corbett requesting that there be no cut, and that was already happened. I think sometimes students, generally speaking, are not as engaged in the public discourse, because it's just a budget proposal. It's going to go a long time before we ever have a final resolution, and sometimes they wait for the final resolution, and it is difficult sometimes to get them to see that there is a situation that they are going to be impacted badly because of it. Particularly people who are just thinking about coming to college for the first time, and it's hard to get them engaged, and we're working diligently to do so. I think last year we were very successful. We want the students to speak, because when the students speak, the legislature listens. Right? They don't care about the faculty. They don't care about staff. They don't care what we say. They think that we're biased. But when students speak, they listen to the students. And we're going to be working this semester to make sure that that happens again.
The president of California once postulated that there's a plan or an effort being made in Pennsylvania to eliminate public universities.
Dr. Armonte, yeah.
Right.
I don't know. I don't like to speak about agendas or conspiracies. At the same time, I think that when you look at people's priorities and values, it becomes clear where they lie. So the governor has eliminated and is trying to eliminate funding for higher education, public higher education. The governor had a private education, so maybe he doesn't value what it is to have a public education, right? At the same time, he's created a board that's supposed to look into what we're going to do with public education. And when you look at that board, and they're on the web, almost all of them come from private entities. Right? We have our chancellors on that board, and I think that was it. You got Penn State president, you got the president of Lincoln, you've got the president of Allegheny College, you've got one student, I think, from Grove City that's on that board. And those are going to be the individuals who are going to decide, and some of them are completely outside of education. I think the CEO of the QVC network is on that. These people are outside of education to tell us how we're going to do public higher education. And if they're all in the private sector, they don't care, clearly, about public higher education. Right? And I think that if you have a complete decline in public higher education funding, that indicates what your values are, conspiracy or not.
In all fairness to Governor Corbett, though, some of these efforts were launched before he became governor, in terms of including more private people.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we've gotten to the privatization issue. I think that happened at the Board of Governors, probably under Governor Ridge, but also carried on by Governor Rendell. There's no doubt about that, where we've tried to incentivize universities to compete with one another. We do that through performance funding, so we don't get all the appropriation, even though when it comes, part of it's set aside for performance funding, where people who perform well against others get more money. And I think that that's part of the model. There's nothing wrong with that in itself. There's nothing wrong with, trying to incentivize people to work well and compete with one another. It's just at some point in time you have to have a bare base level of funding that you're going to promise the universities, and you can't continually cut it and then still say that you're a state-owned university or that there's public higher education in the Commonwealth, because at some point it simply will not be true. Then we're saying basically the state doesn't care whether or not you get a college education anymore.
Well, let's end with some good news.
Okay.
Clarion is doing a lot of great things and still educating students, and
right.
We'll find a way around this if we have to.
Absolutely. I think we are a very happy campus, right? We've got a dedicated faculty, we've got great students, and we've got a president and a provost that are dedicated to the university. I'm delighted to have them on board, and I think they've got some great ideas to move us forward. And I think we will move forward, and we're going to get past this. We always will. It's a matter of the governor at some point realizing that Pennsylvania's value public higher education, even if he does not, and that it's going to be here even when he's gone, and that we're going to continue and we're going to thrive and we're going to make this the best university for the region that we possibly can.
Thank you, Jamie. Jamie Phillips, president of the Clarion University branch of APSCUF. Thank you for joining us today on Clarion Connection.
Thanks, Ron.